Hello, everybody. Welcome to our conversation today on healthy boundaries and how it relates to the burnout and mental health epidemic we're facing globally in the workplace. I am Jocelyn Pepe, founder of True and fractional head of mental well-being and organizational health, as well as mental health researcher and coach, and a member of the Global Wellness Institute's Workplace Wellbeing Initiative. And I'm here today with Carrie Marchment.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you for all the amazing work you do. I am Carrie Marchment, and I am also a professional coach. Currently, I coach in the hockey world as well, many corporate leaders, emerging leaders, and I focus a lot of my coaching on well-being. And I'm happy to be here today and share whatever insights possible on setting boundaries.
Thanks, Carrie.
So we found this quote and we thought it was appropriate for today. It's boundaries are not about control. They are a way of resetting power dynamics in relationships, of restoring our sense of agency and choice. Maybe most important, boundaries are how we shelter our authenticity, our real selves, and they are essential as we build relationships with one another, by Prentice Hemphill. So I'm Carrie Marchment, and this is an important conversation for me, as I have firsthand have an understanding of how a lack of boundaries can lead to stress, resentment, and a sense of losing control over one's life. I have always been fiercely independent, never asked for help, always being the people pleaser and taking care of others before myself. I learned after many years taking care of myself first meant taking care of others, and also allowed me to perform at a higher level than always spreading myself too thin, both personally and professionally. And Jocelyn, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Carrie. Thank you. I'm happy to be here today and having this conversation, as Carrie said, around boundaries and how we both have firsthand experience with the impact lack of boundaries has on overall health and well-being in the workplace and out of the workplace. And so from my perspective, I've always been a high achiever. And when I think about the different aspects that have really impaired me in having boundaries, it's really people-pleasing qualities and hyperachiever qualities that want me to learn and grow and do well and be the best I can be for everyone in my life. And it had a negative impact on myself. So the overachiever in the workplace turned out to be lack of boundaries, saying yes to everything in my personal and professional life. And for me, it led to a leave of absence and a deep, deep level of burnout. And that actually was a significant turning point for my well-being journey, personally and professionally, because of the impact I knew that it had on me, and then the impact it had on my family members, and also the impact those individual qualities had on my team members at the time. So we're looking forward to sharing a little bit today about really what are boundaries, what are the benefits of having boundaries, how can we set some boundaries, and let you all leave with some actionable items to implement in your day-to-day life. And before we head in, I had another quote that we found that was really relevant to this topic, and it's from Warren Buffett. The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. So with that, Carrie, let's go into what does it even mean to set a boundary? What is a boundary?
Yeah, for me, it's a really good question. And for me, setting a boundary is, if we say yes to this, what do we need to say no to? I think, as we've both just described, we can say yes to everything. However, the effects of saying yes to everything can be very detrimental to our well-being, to our work performance, to our personal and professional life. So by saying yes to one thing, what do we need to say no to is about setting boundaries for us, for me.
Mhm. Yeah, this is really great. And I think the one thing that we didn't mention in the beginning is Carrie and I both professionally coach inside organizations and with various coaching organizations. And as a head of mental health and well-being, fractionally with organizations, Carrie and I see this day to day at every single level of leadership, from the C-suite all the way through to independent contributors. And so we are going to weave in our experiences personally, as well as the professional aggregate data that we notice and hear through the work that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thanks, Jocelyn.
Yeah. So this concept of boundaries, I wanted to expand a little bit on the yes and the no. And there's something, it seems so simple, and yet it's so difficult. So, what are, like, from your perspective, Carrie, what are some of the things that you see and hear getting in people's ways of these really easy things to say yes and no to?
Yeah, one of the common threads that I find is, again, that hyperachiever or people pleasing, and the fear of saying no at work. Oh, if I don't say yes to anything, my performance review is not going to be good. I need to keep raising the bar so I get better and better and do as much as possible at work. And we actually know doing as much as possible is really not. We're not performing at our peak. We're generally not resting well. We're not covering all the other pillars of our well-being by being social, sleeping well. Lots of rumination generally starts with what's going on at work. So I think it's really important. And we know that those things are important for high performance at work. So by saying yes to something, again, what other aspects of your life are you saying no to? And when it's really important, I think, that leadership gives the opportunity for people to say no. So those can be curious questions coming down from leadership of what's on your plate now? Not just can you handle this, but what will you say no to by taking this on?
Mm. Yeah, and I feel too, like in the workplace specifically, from the global working environment that we both get to be a part of, is the work quality. And this is a big conversation that we're having right now. A workplace well-being perspective is when we are constantly going over our boundaries and saying yes to too many things, there's actually a impact on quality of work and quality of contribution and quality of impact in that work. And so from a cognitive functioning brain perspective, lack of boundaries and the burnout epidemic or the mental health epidemic and depression and anxiety lead to brain fog and things that really get in people's way of contributing to their potential. And then I believe really deeply that people want to have purpose and in high levels of contribution and impact. And when they're not able to be in that place, it leads to a spiral effect in poor mental health. What do you notice in that space, Carrie?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I often hear the comment, I feel like I'm not doing anything well. And I recall that from when my kids were younger. I didn't feel like I was being a good mom. I didn't feel like I was doing good work. I didn't feel like I was doing anything to my full potential, although I was spinning my wheels everywhere I went. And there was just a lack of presence. And for myself, I didn't allow myself time to pause and go, okay, what changes do I need to make right here? Who do I need to call in for support? And how can I say no?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
That pause feels like a very powerful moment. And what I feel is happening on a global scale is there's unconsciousness to creating boundaries. So people just aren't aware of what they don't know because they're just living habitually on a hamster wheel. And there's also a deep level of fear to say no to people. So
Mm.
all of that kind of weaving in the brain health and the brain well-being around it is like there's a lack of awareness because we're just in a day-to-day rabbit race. And then there's also like the fear, so a fear perspective to saying no. Um, how does that sit with you?
Yeah, agreed. I think that sort of circling back to what I had mentioned earlier about how leadership can actually ask the questions when they are delegating work. What is possible? What's not possible? And knowing that it's a safe space to say no. So, then creating that safe space for people to say, hey, no, I just have too much on my plate right now. Because what I often hear is, um, people saying yes all the time, but we need more people, we need more staff, we need more staff. Well, if you keep saying yes, you're definitely not getting more staff.
Mm.
Because people will just grind, and then burnout happens, and generally people are off work because then burnout has happened. So not only do you need more staff, we've lost people due to burnout because they're not saying no.
Mm. That's incredible and interesting that you talk about a safe space. So this really leads to a bigger conversation around psychological safety and a psychologically safe workplace culture to say no. At a bigger picture, there's so much going on globally right now in the all the pillars of the world that lead to a place where I see employees at all levels in a deep sense of fear for job security, financial security, and there's both people leaving the workforce because of the burnout, but people like overdoing their work because and being burnt out because of this deep level of fear. So, um, what I'm curious if you have any insights into creating a psychologically safe workplace culture that allows people to have these boundaries.
Yeah, well, I think is transparency.
Mm.
Being very transparent with expectations. This is another theme that I see and hear much of the time of, well, I need to do it. Well, are you sure? Do you need to do it? And by when? So for leadership to be very clear on what the expectations are, and if they're not, for the people to ask and ask the questions. When is this due? Is this a priority?
Mm.
And together have clear communication. Like, again, I love Brene Brown's clear as kind.
Mm.
So are you clear on what the expectations are? As a leader, are you clear with the expectations? And have you created a space for people to say no, or people to negotiate? Because it doesn't always have to be a hard no. That's hard. That's difficult. It's uncomfortable for people to say, no, that's not going to happen. So, what negotiation can happen when work is delegated?
Mm. I love that because I love that we're going between like the micro of the culture or the macro of the culture and the micro of what individuals can do and what is in their control to create authority within their roles. And when you were speaking around the psychologically safe work environment, what else came up for me was leadership training and leadership training in foundational communication skills like curious questions, effective listening, and that negotiation piece.
Mhm.
Yes, I can do this, and that would mean I would have to stop doing something else. I feel like is really, really important in a really well culture these days because when leaders are trained to ask those deeper, more meaningful questions, it can be, what is your capacity? what
Mhm.
on a scale of 1 to 10, how far, how much capacity do you have? And then really listening or noticing the signs. So whether it's what someone says, like in their words, or what is not said in their body language or reaction, are really critical to this conversation around boundaries, because it's not just up to employees and it's not just up to the workplace culture, it's up to both. So I've definitely seen and noticed that leadership training and leadership development in conscious communication is really critical in some of those foundational communication skills.
Yeah, agreed. And I love the scaling that you offered that, from 1 to 10, where are you? And, what would, if you're an 8 out of 10, what would bring you down to a 7? That can be really helpful for leaders to ask those questions and see what they can take off someone's plate
Mm,
and delegate elsewhere, or just say no.
mhm,
Um, and I think that conscious leadership, I think that brings me to agency. So, we all have agency, and it's about, or we need to dig into it. So it's about pausing, the pause of, because the automatic response a lot of this time, yeah, I'll do it. Who's the first one to put up their hand? Nobody's saying anything in meeting. Yeah, I will do it. When we
mm.
know those type of people are generally overloaded. So it's the pause and checking in with ourselves. Can I really do this? And, what will I be saying no to by doing this? Once we start to pause,
Mm.
we can move forward from there with awareness.
This reminds me of a conversation I had this past week, and the pause and the what you have acknowledged is, if in a meeting or a leader asks for someone to do something, the person that I was working with was a yes always, because who else is going to do it? Nobody else is raising their hand. So if no one else is going to do it, well, then I must. And that was a lot of the inner dialogue. And then we had that opportunity to really be like, is that true? And how do you trust that someone else will pick up the ball, or, find different ways to do the work or disperse the work, whether it's on different team members, or a realignment of business goals, or um, priorities amongst the groups.
Yeah, agreed. I think the pause is key. It brings sort of that self-awareness in, and is something's going to positively or negatively affect you at work and at life, and how's it going to actually affect your performance?
Mm.
Going back to young kids at home years ago, and I'm not doing anything right or well, which then creates that, like, awful negative self-talk that starts coming up as well, which is not helpful to perform at your best.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, it's such an interesting conversation. There are so many health benefits to setting healthy boundaries. So we've kind of talked about what we see, what we're noticing in people not having boundaries, or the impact of not having boundaries and the impact of having boundaries. I'm wondering if it's a good time to like go a little bit deeper into what are the health benefits. When we're talking about workplace well-being, we're talking about the health and well-being of a healthy, well culture, a healthy, well organization, a healthy, well group of employees, which we
Mm-hmm.
know leads to a healthy and well bottom line. The figures and the statistics and the data are incredibly clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if we go a little bit into some of those health benefits, because when people start to recognize the boundaries are, there's a reason, like there's a why for the boundaries. And it's about aligning to values. We'll get into this a little bit later when we share some really concrete actionable items for our listeners to take away. But there's a real why behind setting boundaries, because a lack of boundaries um, impacts our well-being, and can lead to high levels of stress, which we know are incredibly detrimental to all of our health, heart health, brain health, mental health. But that stress reduction piece, when we set healthy boundaries and are able to step a little bit further out of our comfort zone and saying no, there's an opportunity to reduce stress because it decreases overwhelm, and lowers stress. And high levels of stress in the body can be high levels of cortisol, high levels of neuroinflammation, high levels of inflammation,
Mm,
which all impact mental health, as we kind of talked about earlier. So um, that that personal control and self-efficacy that you continue to point to helps reduce anxiety and depression, because it puts us, or every individual, in the driver's seat of their own life. And then from like an actual physiological mental health perspective, setting boundaries, if it reduces stress, it then reduces inflammation. So there's
mm,
such a cascading effect in that perspective. Um, I think we have another really interesting quote uh, to share, and it's about like the relational aspect of.
mm,
Do you have that there, Carrie?
mm,
So I'll keep talking, but it's the enhanced relationships. By setting healthy boundaries, we create mutual respect and understanding via conscious communication, which we talked about from that workplace perspective. But there was a
mhm.
really cool quote that we had from Prentice Hemphill as well about
Yeah,
relation.
yeah, and boundaries are the distance at which I can love, respect you, and me simultaneously.
Right? So it's a both of us, like a respect and appreciation of both of us, which impacts intra-personal relationships. Inter and intra-personal relationships. It impacts our relationship with ourselves, and it impacts the relationship we have with others, because lack of boundaries can lead to resentment and anger and all kinds of
Ah,
emotions that are unproductive, I feel like.
yeah, I love that. You know what, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the social impact and the resentment that comes up with saying yes to everything or being delegated work and not negotiating. No, this is impossible right now. And it's that, being at work, resentful that your friends and family are out doing something else, which can take us into a dip. At least I'll speak for myself. It's like, look at everybody out there having fun, and I'm supposed to be there.
Mm,
And it doesn't feel good.
mhm,
And as we know, the resentment builds over time. And then what?
What do we do with that? What I
Yeah.
like about that feel good piece, though, on the contrary to that, is when people do start to put boundaries in place and do step outside of their comfort zone around it, it increases confidence. And so,
Mhm.
um, leading to higher levels of self-esteem, which is a common coaching topic around mental health and well-being in the workplace, or leadership and employees, is really stepping further into leadership presence and leadership confidence, and having that empowered sense of self really does positively impact mental health.
Yeah, agreed. And being able to say no can create better time management.
Mm,
So really proactively looking at your time
mhm,
and what's possible rather than being reactive. So again, which brings me back to the pause. When do you pause during the week or during the day to be proactive with, okay, what is on my plate? How am I feeling? What do I need right now?
mm. And in the pause too, I feel like there's an actionable, tangible item around calendars and people really honoring calendar blocking and calendar time that really just is an accountability. And I'm very guilty of even just moving my own calendar around to accommodate the yes. But how do you use something like that easy to take a break, to take a walk, to say no to something, and just leverage that, a time management tool to manage your energy.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. You mean setting up meetings on a Monday morning?
Yeah, exactly. Just like that.
Yeah.
Monday morning meetings are not a thing.
Yeah. Uh,
That just goes to protection from burnout. We kind of acknowledge, like, there was a whole Harvard Business Review on manage your energy, not your time. And it's really about energy
Mm.
management and how do you manage your own energy with boundaries, because that means you're not overextending yourself. You do have good energy stores for doing good quality, impactful work. And it keeps your energy levels high, which protects you from burnout or panic attacks or anxiety or depression and any of the mental health pieces that we're seeing in the workplace these days.
Yeah, and I feel, Jocelyn, that we're talking a lot about externally boundaries. I know I have to set boundaries for myself also,
Mm.
because I will keep raising the bar. And I know you as achiever as well will keep raising the bar on what needs to be done and how. So that awareness and pause within ourselves and going, okay, what part do I have to play in this?
Mm.
And what boundaries do I need to set for myself? And when's enough enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it starts within.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've covered a couple of the other benefits already, is like the improved focus and productivity, really
Mm-hmm.
just from a cognitive impact perspective, and the prevention of resentment. And that really can lead to no good, with inner health and well-being, with the inter and intrapersonal experiences, with self and others.
Mm-hmm.
So that self piece, uh, we can get into like really negative self-talk, but then it can be like also a projection onto other people, whether that's in the team or in our personal life. Because I think that I've kept us a lot in the workplace in the conversation, and all of this impacts everything. And so when I'm coaching with high achievers and people who really want to contribute, which is everybody, it's about like, how does my boundaries at work impact my personal life, and this work life integration and the whole conversation around human sustainability. It's personal and professional. So I know you have a lot of experience in just your work with that. What would you say about the personal and the professional, the integration of it all with boundaries?
Yeah, I think it's always going to ebb and flow. We're always going to have, something where there's more at work, or your personal life is taking on a lot. And again, I just keep coming back to awareness. Where am I? And is it okay? Things are slow at work right now. Okay, that's okay. And can we have the flexibility? And again, the safety that it's okay for it to be a little bit slower, and
Mm-hmm.
not just create busy work necessarily, because we have to be going all the time. Is this an opportunity, when we don't have the work to do, to build relationships within the organization, bring in some more social aspects that might be beneficial to somebody? So again, everything's not always going to be fantastic. It's how we move through the highs and lows of it all. And yeah, if we have personal things going down, we need to maybe step back a little bit from work and ask for permission to do so. Again, that clear communication to whoever needs to know.
Mm. And it just makes me think about, first we have to give ourselves permission, and then we have to ask
Mhm.
permission. So there's always this delicate dance of ourselves and checking in with ourselves, and who is it that we also have to, align with in this conversation. So that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a lot of the things that we've talked about saying no, or negotiating, or clear communication, it sounds fantastic. If this isn't your go-to, it's going to be difficult to start these conversations.
Mm.
Um, However, from my experience, once people have started these conversations and opened up a little bit, it's wow. It's kind of the expression, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Mm.
So
And to add to that, it's
mhm,
the oxygen mask first.
mhm.
It's really important to put your oxygen mask on first, so then you can be better for others. And that's so much of the conversations that I hear in the workplace is I want to be there for my kids. I want to be there for my family. I want to be there for my team. So yes, if you want to do all that and you want to be your best for all of those people, you have to put your oxygen mask on first.
Mhm. And how do you do that?
And I think that leads us into kind of our third component of our conversation today is
Mhm.
leaving our audience and listeners with some really critical components of setting boundaries. So where would you say that that starts?
Yeah, I think if you both personally and professionally, we're a whole person, so it all matters here as far as I'm concerned. So if you're asked to do something, one of the questions, what did I already have planned for this? What other commitment did I already make? Can I do this? Um, in regards to the personal aspect of it, and then I'll let you speak about it as well, Jocelyn, is like values. What value am I honoring by saying yes to, let's say, this social event or this personal commitment that I have?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, Jocelyn, more on that.
Yeah, so that's something that I find that is a really critical conversation piece around boundary setting is typically people have an uncomfortable feeling because they're not honoring a really strong value of theirs. So if family is a strong value and people are spending 60 hours a week at work, there's a
Mhm.
disconnect there. And it's the
Mm.
inability to say no to some things. Some people have the opportunity to say no, maybe some people don't. Some people might look at it on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis of, and it then incorporate perspectives. But when we're out of alignment with our values, we can check in, like, where do I need to say yes and no more? If family is a really high priority for me, what needs to shift in this moment in time? And then it can also, the other part of this that goes from values is perspective, because often we can be in a very like tight micro perspective, but when we bring ourselves up to more of a global perspective, we can see that actually I'm just being really hard on myself. My the way that I am saying yes and no still needs to change, and the way that I'm looking at these situations also needs to change. So I wanted to add in a little bit about values and perspectives there as some key components to check in with everybody, to check in with themselves on when they're looking at setting boundaries. Where can they check in with their values and what they're honoring and not honoring? Because when we're not honoring values, there's a dissonance. And then what is our perspective? Because there's multiple ways to look at every situation, and how can we just look at things differently from different angles in order to get a clearer picture of what boundaries do need to be set.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you brought in perspective, because typically when we're in something, we've got the blinders on. So it is about taking the blinders off and saying, okay, what's possible here? And then I think it's about communicating this to others, again, personally and professionally. And once again, I think there's some discomfort in that, but that discomfort is we're growing. And what are the possibilities to communicating what your needs are? And again, like you said, putting on your mask first, and how that filters throughout our entire life.
Mm-hmm. And then I think build on the communication, like that communicating with courage is a muscle to exercise, just like
Mhm.
in the gym when you're exercising a muscle, it takes time to get stronger and stronger.
Mhm.
So building on that, there's a clarity piece in communication. So clarity of expectations and negotiation, which we kind of talked about earlier. So how do you, whether you're an independent contributor or a leader inside an organization or in your life, how do you set a clarity of expectations so you know what you're capable of and what your capacity is, and so others know what you're capable of and what your capacity is? And that takes what you've just spoke about, that communication and courage, to really have these like really intentional, really purposeful conversations, so that there is responsiveness and dynamic conversation versus like harboring or a reactiveness, because that is a lot of what I do see is when we're not creating healthy boundaries, there's emotional reactivity, which just is I think your analogy of it, and I really love it, is you try to push the beach ball under the water and eventually it just explodes. That is happening everywhere I look in today's day and age. And so boundaries really help us have more responsiveness in communication and fluidity versus very reactive explosiveness, which just creates a mess.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that built up resentment again that we talked on can be create some negative feeling and emotions. I also believe that these negative feelings and emotions can be indicators for action. So with that pause of, oh, I'm starting to get resentful. Okay, well, what do we want to do about it? So those negative feelings and emotions can create a positive impact if we go have these conversations. How do I delegate more? What can I delegate? Who can support me here? What do I need to say no to?
Yeah. And so it's a loop. I think what we're summarizing is this is not a one and done experience. This is a constant circle of evaluation to respond to how life is coming at you, at us, and check in. So it's always an awareness, checking in on your perspective, on your values, on where you're out of alignment with your boundaries, and then a shift in your action and behavior. And that could be a weekly, could be a monthly, could be a yearly conversation with yourself and checking in with how you're responding, to really create overall healthy, good well-being. And boundaries are such an important part of that.
Agreed. And I love the weekly and being proactive with what's happening this week. How will I take care of myself first? What do I need to say no to? And sometimes we need to cancel out on things because, yeah, it's, it's
I
okay.
think that's a really important one to end on.
Yeah. So I think it's again, giving permission to yourself that, yeah, I'm the one driving here, and it's okay that I say no or I cancel today.
I love that. I love that because so often I hear, well, I made this commitment, so like now I'm locked in. Actually, no, you're not. Like we all have autonomy over our lives. And unless it's like incredibly urgent and it is something you can't cancel, it's like, how do you ask for permission from yourself to create space? But then how do you approach that with another person? I've really overbooked myself or my back-to-backs are too much. Would you mind if we shifted our meeting? Would you mind if we moved it out? Is it something we can do over email, telephone, quick, and just finding different ways to connect and communicate that create a little bit more space.
Amazing. Yeah. The negotiation.
Awesome. So I think we're coming to the end of everything that we really wanted to share and talk about. I wonder if there's an inquiry or an action or a call to action that we could leave our audience with that will put them on their way to navigating healthy boundaries.
Yeah, for me, mine would be the pause, the check-in. Where am I? Again, with all the inputs we have coming at us today, it's really important for that pause and take ownership, make decisions based on what's best for you and your well-being, and have those conversations, even if they feel a little difficult.
That's great. And I think mine is more of healthy boundaries are imperative for your physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being. Healthy boundaries play into every single aspect of your health and all of those pillars, and having them with support, whether it's from a coach, a mentor, a leader, a peer, a family member, have a conversation, create that self-awareness and have some accountability to help you build that new muscle if it's unfamiliar in different areas of your life. So I think that's my real stake in the ground as we end this conversation around boundaries is the imperative impact it has, and how positively it can impact your overall mental health, physical health, emotional health, social well-being, and your contribution in the workplace, which all goes under social well-being and having purpose, and that external focus in the world.
Yeah, I love it.
Thanks, Carrie. This was a great conversation, and thanks
Yeah.
everybody for listening. Reach out if you have any questions or inquiries about anything we've talked about or shared today.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Joss. Have a great week.
You too.